Alright, so, hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. Our first order on the agenda is public comment, which we have none, so we're gonna move on to the next order of business to approve the minutes from the May meeting. Do we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. And, any questions, concerns, comments about the minutes? All in favor? Okay, thank you, they're approved. The next item on the agenda was we were due to have a presentation from SCPS staff. Our new chief legal counsel was going to come and speak with us. However, he had not feeling well. He was unable to join us today. So that will be pushed to our first meeting at the beginning of the school year, and you'll get to meet him, and he'll get to meet you. Our next item up on our agenda is to discuss the bylaws and review the bylaws. So the bylaw information was, the bylaws were sent to everyone for review. We discussed Article 3, Section 3 would be a new article or new area, and Article 6, Section 1 would be deleting the wording and maybe altered by majority vote. So those were the two changes that were sent out. And that's the only thing that we can vote on this evening for bylaw changes, because of our bylaws, the notification has to be sent out 20 days in advance. So do we have a motion to accept those bylaw changes? Okay, I saw Lauren's hand first, sorry. Is there a second? The last I got you. Okay, any discussion?
I'll chime in. Hello, everyone. Looking over them last two ago, I realized that we put the bylaws, the member consideration for removal to the board. We put that under the purview of the officers. And I was like, the issue we had was with some of our officers. And so then it would kind of been like, stalemate, null and void. We're trying to like make productive and keep things moving. What we drafted up, I think any of us saw it. I saw it in hindsight. I was like, you know what? Everything we're looking at, that was kind of, yeah, it would have been the same thing because we put it on purview the officers. So I just want to put that out there. I know it's kind of like, well, darn it.
I was just gonna ask the same thing. I wasn't here at the last meeting because my kids' sports conflicted, but then I noticed the same thing, that it says it has to be recommended by the officers, but the issue is that it's the officers who aren't coming to the meetings. So can we just change?
We have to see, that's
Then it has to wait another
yes.
20
Yep.
days.
However, we can consider it at our first meeting. So again, something to discuss now, and then we can make adjustments to the bylaws. Again, that's something that we want to do. So,
When will we be electing new officers?
yeah, our bylaws state in Article 5, Section 2, elections of officers will take place at the first meeting of each school year.
So what would we change the language to? Is there a proposal to, is there an idea?
Let's first vote on this motion, and then we can add that because I think if that's the will of the committee, then we can go ahead and move forward with looking at that and then send out information again for looking at that in our first meeting.
But our intent will be to adopt this amendment with the current language for officers in it,
We would either need to adopt it or
or not.
or decline it. Yeah, at this point. Any other discussion about that?
Well, I guess I'm wondering if we don't adopt it,
We maintain the current rules we have until the fall.
Well, we can just make an amendment to it for
yeah,
next time. So we could adopt as it is and then just make an amendment for it.
We could, yes, that's possible. So instead of discussing a whole new set to revamp, we discuss a tweak.
Because maybe we have like a section on officer responsibilities and then as well as committee responsibilities. Like general members.
Like, something like in light of an officer not serving
An entire term.
or just not doing their duty.
Yeah, because then in that case, then could we have a mid-year election?
That's a whole new party. Again, none of us saw it, and I just saw it, I was like,
All right, do we want to, can we write those notes down though, so we remember whether,
We can discuss it right after this vote, yes.
okay, sorry, so let's
Yes.
go.
So I'm gonna go ahead and call the vote to see if we want to move forward or not. So all those in favor? We have, sure, we have a first and a second for accepting the motion as is, which states, let me restate that section that we're talking about. Members are expected to attend all meetings and communicate if unable to attend. A member may be removed from membership after missing 3 meetings through recommendation of the officers and approval of the Board of Ed. So the officers have to recommend it. That's our wording right now. So that's what we're voting on. So all those in favor?
that's what we did.
Any? That was unanimous, so thank you. Okay. Now, it sounds like we want to discuss bylaws slightly some more. So does anyone have a wording?
What if it said, through recommendation of the officers, something about how if it's the officer who's missing 3 or more meetings, it has to be recommended to the majority of the rest of the
That's what-
committee. I agree.
Like, if the officer is the member in question, then a majority of the,
Have to recommend the removal, and then the Board of Ed has to
Now-
agree.
But that right there, the majority stands as the majority at any given meeting based on our bylaws. And so do we want to put a number on that particular piece? So if like 4 of us are there and like 3 of us say this person should go, you want to go with that?
You're worried about a coup.
Yeah.
Not a coup, just,
Drama.
my concern is, due process of fair representation, like, I guess it's, yeah. It's just something that.
But it
like-
still has to be approved by the Board of Education,
It
right?
does,
So
it
it,
does.
like,
There's
even
some-
if it's 3 or 4
Checks and
people,
balances,
yeah, the Board of Ed still has to say, okay,
Yeah.
this officer
Right.
didn't show up to 6 of the meetings and no word. We see
Exactly.
why they're recommending it.
Right. And I think, especially based on this year and
Yeah,
looking at our
I'll
size,
bring this to us.
it would be the people who are probably there the most who would be observing. And I don't think people are like beating down the bush to be an officer, so I don't think they would do it because they want that position.
No one's overthrowing right now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Maybe it needs to just include a justification.
That's a good, I think that,
Oh,
I
okay.
agree.
We only had it based on attendance.
But if it's based on, well,
We didn't have religious
And it's
for, like-
attendance, and then it says that you have to have, if you're absent,
Yeah.
you have to communicate. So it's both missing and not communicating
Right.
that you're missing. So that that is a condition.
Yeah,
and
that's
Since
what's
we're
gonna
here,
happen.
Right.
It was brought up, like, bad behaviors, we put it in there too. This behavior of becoming a member of the.
I guess you might as well just have it.
Just-
I think that's fair.
Since
We're
we're
making
here,
this
just-
up,
yeah.
Why not?
No, yeah, I think that's fair.
That'll be.
People need to act professionally if they're representing.
We'll tie it back to board behavior after our, traffic council. Something wrong with
Yeah, I just think that's, I think we're,
Too much in the.
yeah, legislating morality. I think that, if somebody's not behaving appropriately, they're gonna be voted off the island, right? Through, some other means, aren't they?
But we don't, I think that's what we're saying, we don't have
No,
any
that's
other
what
means.
this is.
Yeah.
I-
So we're putting the means in.
Yeah, I just think we're getting way too in the weeds.
I can agree with that. I can. I think I wouldn't want to we got other things to look at first. We haven't had that kind of concern, but it's just, we're just here.
Yeah, I would just suggest we be minimalist in what rules are written on to be.
I'm fair with that.
Alright.
I agree. And I think we were talking about, meeting attendance and, we all have families and jobs and responsibilities and illnesses and things can come up. I've had a rough couple of months where I had to miss a lot of things, but I still fulfilled my responsibilities, but I didn't come to a meeting and I will let you know, hey, I'm so sorry I can't come, but I'm gonna do my job and I will send so I feel like that's a little different than,
And I think that's what we
I'm
said.
not
I
here for
think
6 months.
we
So,
said
yeah.
if somebody's communicating,
Yeah,
I have COVID, for example, we can't come to a meeting, but they're
Yes.
still clearly reading the minutes and keeping up with it. That's
and that's
not
being
what we're talking
responsible.
about. We're talking about
Right.
radio silence.
Slowing
Right,
down.
and that's in there. I mean, it
Yeah,
says
great.
communicates that they're unable to attend.
Yeah.
Which is just shooting an email off saying, I can't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it said a member may be removed was the other thing, and I think it was based upon extenuating circumstances, so.
I like
What I
that.
have is if an officer is missing 3 or more meetings, the officer may be removed from membership by a majority vote of the committee. So that's what we'll look at for next time. Does everyone?
That's great.
I think that's simple.
Do you have to clarify when you say by a majority of committee, do you have to say majority present or majority of our membership, or does it matter?
We could, but right, as it stands right now, it would go by majority president.
Okay, I'm good with that. I just want to make sure we didn't have to say present.
And that's in our bylaws already, under
Okay.
meetings, it says voting will be done by a show of hands with majority rule of votes present.
Perfect.
So that's already there. Okay, so we will, again, I will email that out prior to our next meeting, 20 days at least 20 days in advance, and then we'll vote on it at the first meeting in September. Okay. So, moving on.
Yeah.
We are at presentation from subcommittees. So, is there anyone that would like to start?
Sure.
Well, Amanda and I reviewed the ones we were assigned, and I don't recall them offhand which numbers they were, but in the review, there was very little to change. It was, what was the one language?
It
that
was
kind
pretty
of-
straightforward. The only thing, I'm trying to pull it up. We had it was the health, right?
Yeah.
It's not the right email from Sabrina. All right. All right, can't remember. The only thing is that it lumped teachers and students in the same sentence of like their responsibility. And we talked about maybe splitting teacher and student into 2 separate, because they're not the same, But besides that, everything was very
What was the
straightforward.
policy?
It was, trying to find it.
Yeah.
Because based on what it is, it could possibly work in that. That's true. I'll put that. Thank you.
It's one of those, I have it, but for some reason it's not pulling up.
Okay, you have,
Yeah, I had it ready last month.
505, policy 505, health education.
Yeah.
What year was it written? If we pull that up. Just to see, because I feel like health curriculum changes so often.
It doesn't even specifically like discuss
yeah.
anything. It's very,
Okay.
that's,
Just that it'll keep up with,
yeah, that's what I'm trying to, I literally have it and cannot
Oh,
find it all of a sudden.
always.
Right?
It was
And even
adopted- It was adopted in February 20th of 2008. Reviewed January 9th of 2008.
That's pretty old in and of itself, but it's not, you're saying it's pretty basic, it's not talking about specific,
Right.
like standards or curriculum.
It just basically says you have to follow it.
Okay. Like what the Maryland state standards are?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's,
What's the post number?
505.
And which section of it was the, student?
Would have been in the 505.2.
So the board supports efforts to maintain employee and student wellness.
Yes, it was 505.2.
I think it reads fine, but it puts it on the board to enhance and maintain student and employee wellness. So I think that's, because it's pointing to the board in that one, it's the board's care of the employees and students. I think that's fine. If I remember, I'm reading right policy, I'm on section 505.2, motion.
I like that it includes employee wellness in there. Does it have like mental health?
So I was just looking through my notes or my text with
Yeah.
Will, and I did say it was missing mental and physical health and wellness.
Okay.
But also, again, because it's so vague, does it cover
Is it covered
that?
somewhere else?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Again, based on our process, I don't think there's anything here I can, pick up and change.
Yeah.
Right, that's why we didn't think it was anything that was going to be.
Is there something you can add to make it more, like, to make sure that there's mental health included in here and just make a policy suggestion for that, like, just to.
So improve fitness, reduce stress.
Does employee and student wellness capture mental health?
Okay, yeah.
Right, so that was the question, because it's so vague, does that also cover the mental health aspect? Because then it lists things, but it doesn't say mental health, but it says reduce stress, which can be mental and physical. That was the only thing.
You know, I would say wellness kind of is an all-encompassing word, because, well, body and mind.
But if it doesn't say it specifically, then I feel like the board isn't required to approve suggestions for programs that would support wellness, like
Right.
mental health.
So then if we were gonna go that route and do a detailed breakdown, we'd have to include other factors of health. So what would you include other?
Well, I mean, it already says fitness, improve fitness, reduce stress, so it does mention some aspects of health. So what she's saying is that it does not mention mental health
So
specifically.
can we just make a suggestion to have a separate component that's mental health?
I mean, it's in substance abuse education. Can't there be mental health education? with
Right.
Very similar language.
Yeah.
'Cause that's really super vague.
Right.
But I do think it's different than wellness.
So then, okay, so since there's some fervor here, so here's what I'm gonna do. Right now, I'm actually working with the policy committee right now. They got a lot on their plate, and I heard from Mr. I don't say his name properly.
Levis.
David
Please, Levis.
Levis. I don't say what I'm saying, right, Mr. Levis. And our chief counsel, who's not here, he's not well, he's taking care of a sick child as well, hope they're doing better. So their concern is they basically, what I told them is that we would push them with quality insights. And so, and working with the policy committee is now, what they would look for in terms of, like a push-up, if we could point to which section of a policy and say what this we would say. Now, then they'll take it as is, but it gives them a better working point and just say, hey, why would this right here for mental wellness? They won't like, huh?
Right.
Because they're going through a lot right now. So I think if we just look at this policy, if you want to say like red line or blue line, just highlight it, just say, pull paragraph off, draw a line through it, just rewrite it, this is how we're thinking of it to be written. I can keep it to the board, see if I can get buy-in on that one to move it up.
Could we also just look and see if there's a separate policy totally written on
Something
mental?
can, yeah.
Because
See if
maybe
this-
there's a whole policy written on
Maybe you
mental
just,
health, and we don't need to.
Yeah, I think there might be, in this case, if you it's just about the promotion of health and wellness
Right.
as opposed to how the board or the school may act in the event of somebody suffering from a mental health crisis.
Yeah, we really didn't see anything
Wrong.
big or,
Yeah, I agree.
glaring,
Like,
Omission.
Something that was outdated.
right, that needed to be fixed, and we figured some of the other ones probably had a lot more than this one did.
That's in like post-COVID mental health.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal, and that was like a
You
thing
know,
that we kind of
with
wanted to look at.
anxiety and.
So maybe for like
Depressive
future
symptoms.
meetings next year, we
Yeah.
could look at what is the mental health policy? Is there one? If there's not one,
That's not the question. Do we have one? That's what we'll dive.
because if there is something else, I'm good with that. I just,
No, and that's good, that's on the right track, that's on the right track. I'll give you all a spoiler that I've been asking about homework policy for a while. I'll find out that we don't have one, so we'll be developing one now. So, yes.
so it'd be consistent among all the schools. and so
Yes,
it'd be great.
super excited
Oh, I
about that.
like that, yeah.
It's gonna be one of the big things that I get to do with the board, so I'm super excited about it.
Nice. Yeah, there needs to be some consistency.
Teacher to teacher, it changes.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, it's coming up here in the fall. We're looking on that for that one. But mental health policy is, yeah, so we, it's, we did have one resources, let's see, no policy.
And maybe we need time to do more digging before the next meeting, like that could be something we just kind of,
We did have a whole page on it, I'm looking to see if there's a policy attached to it, maybe there's a policy reference on this page. Like reference policy X, Y, Z. That's a great question. Somebody really quick and dirty scan, I'm not finding one.
I know my daughter, at least her school is doing it. And
well, and I think there's different curriculum, like, but the stress, but I think that there might be some room for other, it's such a big issue right now, that it would be nice to really look at what the policy is and make sure that there's something consistent in all the schools providing support for both the staff and students.
That sounds like a great homework to find out.
And it might be cell, it might be, like, they might have it, but just to be like cohesive and,
well, and the age appropriate part is really important because high
Right.
schoolers are gonna need.
But-
quite a
but
lot
also like
more.
cell can be so many, it's social emotional learning. But then what are we also doing for, we're teaching that, so that's a curriculum. But then how are we supporting students and staff members who are struggling with it too?
So do you
because
believe
we're-
that this would fall under its own policy, or could we suggest a new subsection here?
I think if there is not a separate policy on mental health, then we could add a subsection, just because I think that would be my biggest thing with doing a nosedive into some of these policies, and even just for us, feeling cohesive and exactly what is our charge with like this committee. There's so much, so keeping it streamlined so that everything related to health is together. You know, and like, and recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health.
Absolutely it is, absolutely. Yeah,
So if there isn't a separate one, then yeah, I would say
I
that,
haven't found one yet.
Is
It
there
would be good
something in
to
the
just-
blueprint that addresses?
That's a great question. Blueprint covers a lot.
Would be code 4, which is resources. Probably isn't code 4, I would suspect.
and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I feel like if we have the change to the policy, then people can work to get like the staffing to support mental, like it sets things up further down the road for changes that we'd like to see too. Right?
It does. Sorry, you called me an yawn.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good. I just want to make sure I'm not talking out of like,
No, I think mental health is going to be a real issue.
yeah, and I think it's going to take a while. But if we can put that in there to make sure, because then I think it'd be easier at budget meetings to be like, well, this is a policy change that we'd like to see adopted. but this is what it's gonna take, funding and staffing.
So in pillar 4, there's nothing that says mental health.
What's the title for? It's,
Title 4 is
Resources.
to ensure all students are successful, yeah. Nothing there says mental or general. It's just health in there, but behavioral health is the main thing.
Oh, behavioral health is all encompassing of mental health.
Yeah.
Behavioral health is, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what, the substance abuse is, a lot of that language is being changed to substance use because abuse is stigmatizing. So, I mean, it could be a section, behavioral health education, and then it's encompassing substance use and mental health together.
So what about
Yeah.
stress and overwhelmness and just, I feel like things are using in mental health from like this having like every childhood events kind of thing.
I think that's
It's hard to
wellness
get-
though. I mean, mental health is not the same as wellness. Sorry, my clinical social worker office.
Yeah.
Like,
But I think they're both
it's not-
important. I think we
They're
just wanna
both
make sure
very
they're all,
important in
yeah.
different ways, but they each
Yes.
have their you know.
So we need like the umbrella of each of those.
Would it
Yeah,
make
I think-
sense to explore this and see if we do in fact have a policy? So I'm not sure we do.
Yeah, I would.
And then if we don't, come back to the next meeting and have a paragraph describing.
Yeah.
And then see how it ties into pillar 4. There's nothing in pillar 4, especially that I'm looking at McKinney-Vento, I'm looking at what's your system of supports, partner community agencies, social emotional learning is there,
Right.
but nothing that says mental.
Well, So my policy that I read when we go to it kind of talks about tying some things together with CEL and the character counts program. So maybe that's kind of what we're looking at on this end too, that maybe we can connect them, but have like different umbrellas of like social, emotional, mental health, wellness, like the different, and then physical. And that, I mean, that ties to a lot of the things that we were, when we did our priority list over here on the whiteboard between safety and behavior, food, nutrition, like stuff like that. I feel like that encompasses a lot of those goals.
With the worker, would you look into the policy or? Thank you.
And then we can, again, when we come back together, we can look at completing this form for, if there is no policy. And we need to, again, that's not our role, is to write policy or to do that, but to say, could that be explored for a future policy? And also have legal look at that and then look at steps forward. If that's the will of the board, but that has to go to Mr. J first.
I know we had a recommendation from, who's the character council? Yes.
Yeah, so I don't have my notes, but Sabrina was willing to project because I
Yeah, I really.
got
like it.
stuck in a
I love
traffic
that you
jam, so I haven't been
put it
home
out.
yet.
It was really good. Really good.
So I kind of like what you guys are saying. So I looked at the character counts policy and I didn't see anything wrong with the policy as it was, just more that I think schools in general have gotten away from it. So this is my unedited, I need to edit it, but I was trying to just make sure that I was on the right track. So my recommendations were more for building that program back up and combining it with some of the things like the PAS program, which is the current social emotional learning curriculum, and making it more streamlined. And just kind of, instead of having it be a separate thing, if that makes sense. So I was just kind of playing around with what the form would look like to get comfortable with that. So I had sent it to see if I was on the right track. So, and I don't know if you guys are, I did have notes to share, but in case people weren't totally familiar with the program, so it's actually like a purchased curriculum, like it's a whole thing, but it's the pillars. And it used to be like every like YMCA, every school, like the awards program, they would get it, you know, the kid that represented the pillar. And so the program has kind of streamlined itself. I think it used to be like 6 pillars. And now they focused on 4 areas of the pillars. And I think it can easily be streamlined to go along with PBIS, which is,
Positive behavior.
thank you.
Which is sports.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think, is every school in Frederick County a PBIS school or just schools that choose to be?
I believe it's schools that choose to
Okay.
participate in program,
But
it
then
is
every school has paths.
correct.
Okay. And paths is a curriculum for teaching social emotional learning. So if the teacher has a guide, so this would be a similar curriculum. And I think Frederick County had purchased it before. I don't know if there's updates or anything like that, but just some background. But I like how they have kind of revamped it, and I think just the policy is fine, just kind of updating it and streamlining it with programs that are newer. So that it doesn't feel like to the schools, to the teachers, that it's one additional thing that they have to do, but that it's connected with things that are already in place. But I liked the wording because it was like civic character, which could be tied in with SEL, could be tied in with social studies. So I just had a few points that I was making in there. So I don't know, I guess my question too, for just us, besides the specific policy, is how detailed we need to get in filling out that form. There's definitely some typos in there, but I just like.
So you want to be able to speak to what your concerns are and what you think could be changed. For me, it's got the most with the severability that we had nothing on that and mentioned, especially in the policy. So I think something like those kind of glaring misses are going to be great catches. You don't have to have like, a full example spelled out, but like if you can identify areas that we need to address, possibly again, they'll do all the enforcement based on what legal factors are in place, what we're up to, what we're required to do, what we can't say. But I think finding those misses, or those gaps that that we missed, those are important.
Okay.
So, yeah, and honestly, bullet points work too.
Okay.
There's a lot of eyes on this, and it goes faster with bullet points.
Perfect.
If the policy is updated, how does it get pushed out to the community to say things have changed?
To the board meeting. So what happens is policy committee will be discussing it. If you want to see what's up for review, policy committee will be reviewing, actually they're meeting here on Thursday, to go over the public comment for board meetings. So they'll be keeping that around. We had the first reading with the board, came back to them. They're going to make some changes again. They come back to the board probably will say, do this, and go back to them. So it's going to bounce around a while. So their agenda is probably the best way to see what's going on. And then every now and again, there's a policy, for now, it will be policy reviews in the board agenda. But when the board's cool with it, they'll go to the action consent agenda. And we just go, we looked at it, we're good with it, all hands. So the best way to see what's happening is a policy.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily talking about for me as a community, but for it to be implemented in the schools.
Then what happens, when the policy is created, and the superintendent will go to the policy and create regulation. And that's how they implement in the schools. She's the action.
Now, if we have ideas, like for, the recommendation of adding cyberbullying, so that was like a big thing that we had put on there too. We make recommendations, like obviously they play with it, and but if we have ideas of things of ways that could be incorporated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it could be received or like going like.
Yeah, they can just,
decide, but like.
But at least they have another head thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So I should just edit it to make it more streamlined with bullet points and then just make.
Easy reads, like make it a quick read, because again, people who are doing this, they got eyes on a lot of documents.
Right. Okay. But that's the extent of what
Yes.
is needed. Okay.
I think you got a big ticket out of that set of bullet points. Because things have changed, things get faster.
Exactly, like I think that could be a big part of it.
I mean, I don't know where we are right now, but we may have to do an AI policy, I don't know.
Yeah, but I could see those areas being related to the one that you guys just talked about, because.
Really, they can be looked at by date, if it's from 2008. Cyberbullying and social media and, things like that.
Right.
Social media was pretty cool back then. It had some value.
MySpace,
And let me just add so that you all are aware, Under Find Out First, you can subscribe to receive information from the Board of Ed, from policy committees, and from different things. So if you're not, it may be good for our committee to start receiving, our members to start receiving some of that information if you're not already receiving it, so you can be aware. Policy changes are put in place and regulations are put in place. That information is sent out, but if you're not subscribing to it, you wouldn't receive it.
And we just do the same thing, like when we add our kids' school to it.
Yes, and you can add PTA, you can add volunteer, you can add quite a few other things, so it depends what you want to streamline. But board, you can add board information, and that's where you'll see the information about the policies and regulations. Okay.
Celeste and I can report on our policy review. We were asked to look at policy 510 on copyright laws.
Okay.
We had a meeting on May 24th with the chief legal counsel, Mr. Blivis, and with the FCPS library media supervisor, Ms. Mary Jo Richmond, to discuss the policy. This policy is adopted in June of 2009. So it's been quite a while since it's been reviewed. But the reason for that is because the policy is very short. It just says merely FCPS will comply with U.S. law and with fair use guidelines. That law and the guidelines have not changed substantially. So there is no change necessary to this policy. Ms. Richmond believes that there is significant change needed with regard to the regulation, but that'll be done separately, obviously. And so we agreed, the four of us, that no further action was necessary for this policy. Celeste, have I missed anything?
No, that's exactly it. It was a really good meeting. With the four of us.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like to hear that. I'd like to meet Blivis before,
I'm sorry that he's not here today because we did have a really good conversation about the policy and the policy of the policies. And he had just, obviously he's only been here a few weeks, and he was really interested in getting into, so we've got this rule about policies are supposed to, I guess it's a policy, that they're supposed to be reviewed every 3 years. And so if it's beyond 3, obviously it's outdated. And, we thought, well, we had the discussion of, is the 3-year rule a good rule? Sometimes like this policy may never change because until the law changes, this policy is just going to sit here and be completely legitimate, valid. But other policies might need to be changed or reviewed a lot more often, especially when you're talking about things that are changing in our society. Like we've got mental health and technology and, things like that. So it was a really interesting conversation about, and also the format of the policies and how that, he's looking at all of that. So I'm really interested to hear from him at some point later about where his office stands. We also did get some insight on how much time the board has to spend on policy review. And I think he mentioned, John, that during the board meeting, they can really only discuss or look at 2 policy issues. And then, is that what he said? Do you remember
I think
that?
it might have been 3, but then it gets to the throughput issue.
Couple minutes per, and now, because obviously there's hours of things they have to talk about every time. So it was a really great conversation, a lot more than, our policy was pretty simple, in and out. But I'm curious to see how that goes and what he, this was kind of his introduction to our committee and what we're charged with. And so he is, interested in learning more about what we're doing. And, I'm interested to see where he takes that office to in the coming weeks.
And we're happy to have him. He was a great add to our team.
He's a lot of dynamic ideas. I'm very excited to see where he's going to go.
You know, some minutes.
Good, John.
It was a great job. I think, brother. Ms. Williams, we hear from them all.
I think that was all that we had. I
We
think
had others,
there
but
was
they
a
didn't-
4th one, but I think they
They didn't show.
resigned. What was the 4th policy we were supposed to look at though?
So we had policy 507, which is summer school eligibility,
Okay.
and policy 515, waivers of board of ed.
Others.
So those were the 2 that are still outstanding.
I can help with those, because I missed the meeting with the subcommittees, so I can help you.
That would be great.
Was somebody assigned to
507
those?
and 515.
507 and 515.
I think they-
Yes,
people
I
are
do
responsible.
not, if I remember correctly. Don't think they are. Five oh seven,
Oh, okay. That one.
okay? And. That's fine.
All right.
So,
That looks good. We approve.
Lindsay's got it. I can do that right now. No, just kidding. I'll look at it a little, I'll look at it more in depth and I can do it the next one.
And I'm gonna put this out there. And again, I've spoken with chief counsel, I've spoken with board members on this one, so I'll be deep with this one. And I've been here a couple of years, I figured I can push this. But while you're taking your input from the community and you see concerns, I want to encourage you to look back and see, is there a gap in policy? Like, it's a concern I'm hearing, is it due to a gap in policy? You know, and that can help us a lot too, because we're doing several, but like those big, like, you know, we just, things, times are moving fast, but they may have missed the communities, like, this is something could be because of the growth of the county, because the county wasn't always this big and bigger. So there's some policy, when something's happening, somebody has a concern, this is happening X, Y, and Z, and you're like, oh, this is because of the size we are, and the policy didn't cover it because it didn't think of the size. So, you know, something like that, something's like an easy, like, just, we didn't think about it because it's just like, it's moving so fast. And there's probably something that happened from COVID that we missed.
Yeah.
So like, when you see those big, like, gaping holes, like the run through those holes and find those. So as you get your community feedback, think about what you're hearing and think about, like, is the concern they have due to a misread or missing a policy? So just think about that. That's how you look at the
I feel like
policy.
that's kind of what we are doing with mental health, because that's definitely something that I'm hearing from so many people that are even seeking mental health resources outside of school for their kids and the way that they can't get it. So I think that is
That's
going
definitely
to
true.
become, yeah, so I think that is something I'm definitely hearing from the community. So just to have some time to see if there is a policy, great, maybe we look at it, but if there's not, I definitely would like our committee to move forward and changing that policy so that it would include
That's an
it.
example. That's an example, yes.
Why would we have people help us?
Yeah, not to be nervous.
Not to-
I mean, we'll take all the help. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
Will and I are like, no, don't help us.
Yeah.
We'll take all your help.
And that might be, maybe that's a focus of the whole committee, you know.
I wish I could share with the committee that the board is actually mindful of this. We had a presentation recently and we saw that there was a drastic increase in 2012 reporting for mental health services. And the number one report they mentioned was that they felt overwhelmed. And so, you know, I can totally relate to that. And I've been looking for that, which is what drove the board support my motion for looking at homework policy. So we're trying to try wherever we can in our power to reduce that overwhelming feeling. We want to help with that. So all I say to say is the board is mindful of mental health. So if you mention mental health, it's not going to deaf ears. They're very much mindful.
And I feel like if you want to streamline the one that I was looking at with Cell, I do think that they go hand in hand, because on one hand, we're teaching them the curriculums and the strategies and things that they could, but then the other is providing the resources and the support if they're already struggling. So like preventative measures and then the,
Building resilience.
yes.
I mean, is there a process for like school counselors to refer out to the, I mean, what do they do if, you know, if the child is seen in the school, but then the needs are outside of what they can provide? Do they just give that to the parents and
I would suspect they give it to the parents, and
then they?
what they're finding is there's a 6-month backlog
Yeah.
to get.
At least, and for longer. And I think too that, so our counselors, I know usually provide like resources, but then it's on the parents. And then whether or not they have insurance, like there's just a whole, sometimes you're actually better off if you don't have insurance because there's more resources there. But yeah, I think if we get the policy in then that allows for the board to look at, do we have enough counselors? Do we have enough psychologists? Do we have enough? Mhm.
Counselors aren't really equipped to go
No.
deep in.
But they can just sell them at cooking strategies. And they're usually dealing with the behaviors because that's who's there.
So, Jay, I've been hearing about not so much policies that are missing, but about problematic implementation of policy, perhaps implementation of regulation, specifically with regard to discipline. That's why Celeste and I are interested in moving on to that subject next.
Okay.
I mean, that policy was recently
So like,
updated.
uneven discipline or like this will not apply at all or?
No, I think it's a question of, I'm hearing this from faculty members in the community, but also occasionally from parents. And it's a question of whether an approach that seems overly weighted towards carrots and fewer sticks is actually effective in practice.
Okay.
And how are we measuring effectiveness? What is effectiveness? How's that defined?
I know the state is, the discipline and measuring effectiveness, the state is really involved in that. So it sounds like that's going to be something up on our purview of advising the board, I recommend some things to them. But I don't know if the policies are already there, whether how it's being applied, it's not a purview, it's a committee's purview. So the committee is welcome to actually share a thought with the board, for sure. So what do you guys come up with, recommend to the board? I just pass that on, for sure.
Yeah, we'll look at the policies, I guess, but along what John is saying about, and we just finished up this last one, so we haven't even jumped into that one. Say we get on there tomorrow, we're like, oh, this is a great policy, it's amazing. It is not happening out there in reality.
And then,
The
yeah.
question is, I hear a lot, and we both had it instantly, we're like, yes, we're gonna do this, like we both knew what we want to do next. For similar reasons, but, talking about consistency and, well, there's a lot of gray, you can choose to give 10 warnings or 3 or 1, or, like there's just different across the board within schools, within communities.
Disciplinary ladder.
But-
Yeah.
Well, we're adopting a new code of conduct right now. That's in the
That's
process.
just true,
Okay.
yes.
Because we're hearing similar things, John, it's less about inconsistency from school to school, even assistant principal to assistant principal. The code of conduct will give a range in what is administrator governed, what is teacher governed, because we have seen a significant inconsistency in practice across the district. Back in the day when I was an assistant principal, some of you may remember we had in our calendar handbook, there was a range. So fighting was minimum this, maximum this. And it was a really helpful tool because when a parent would come in and say, why in the world are you suspending Johnny? Well, here's the range that's been given to me. And we also do progressive discipline. So this is the 3rd time Johnny has fallen. So the 3rd time Johnny, the maximum I can do is 5 days of suspension. So that I think is going to be a real helpful tool. Plus the training that we're going to give administrators will hopefully eliminate some of the inconsistency that is occurring across the system. And it hasn't always been that way. I don't know. I left and actually went to Washington County and adopted the same format in Frederick County for progressive discipline. And when I returned, it was gone. So.
Can I ask 2 follow-up questions? Sure. You mentioned training for administrators. Do we not provide annual training for faculty, on discipline?
We do, and that's typically left to the principal. So what the principal will do, in theory, and what they will be expected to do, so not in theory, is every principal has a opening faculty day meeting. They will cover the code of conduct and how this is going to be implemented within the building. So they'll be trained this summer. We'll then train staff and hopefully get a little more consistency.
And then my second question for you is, how did you all at central office become aware that there were inconsistencies? Is it anecdotal? Doing surveys of faculty? How are you measuring effectiveness?
A lot of it was anecdotal. Well, you remember, may or may not know, but last year I visited 50 schools, 45 schools, and just sat in faculty room. And teachers staff members that wanted to come in just came in and talked to me, and that was a theme. It was a significant theme where it's inconsistent. And to be very frank, some administrators were being way too lenient. So our teachers weren't feeling supported, staff members weren't feeling supported, and it just makes it harder to teach when students aren't being held accountable. So
Well, I think then other students aren't feeling safe too.
close to 55 schools.
Was that in your role as acting?
Yes.
Superintendent? Okay, so you don't do that no more?
I've been to schools.
I know, but I mean, that amount, and basically, it sounds like you had listening sessions at 55 schools. That's fantastic. You do that normally or no? Sorry.
No, I did that very intentionally because of where the system was at the time with COVID and the DOJ. And I was hearing that morale was at an all-time low and that trust was at an all-time low. So I thought it really important just to go out and listen.
Fantastic. Is Dr. Dyson doing anything similar?
She's doing feeder meetings. She's going to each feeder and just listening and taking notes. And she's actually taken it a step further where she's collecting she has her chief of staff collect the information, bring it back to our cabinet, and we look into it and give responses.
Okay, these are feeder meetings with faculty and staff.
Correct.
Okay, very good.
Dr. Mark, I have a question about you said that the new discipline policy will have
It's not a policy, it's a reg.
sorry, the regulation has, like what the administration, teachers, does it also cover, this is an oddly specific question because of parent concerns in my area, support staff and how they can discipline students? I've been hearing a lot of complaints about lunch monitor issues at the elementary school and punishing entire grades and taking large amounts of recess time for talking and laughing and on a regular basis.
That should not be happening, and I would probably reach out to either assistant principal and say, make them aware of it if they're not already aware.
I personally just found out about it like the last week of school, but apparently a lot of other people had known about it and it had been happening on a regular basis. And that support staff disciplining entire grades of students by taking recess time.
I've never experienced that, but I'm not going to dispute it. It's anything's
But I
possible.
think the code of conduct would help with that. because
Right,
Send
so-
us out, the assistant principal or the principal can talk in training them, have a similar language,
Right.
like if this kind of behavior comes up, look at.
Here's what we can do
Yes.
instead of like just
Here's an
coming up with
appropriate- Right.
what's
Here's
not
the-
appropriate.
Right,
Yeah.
that would be something that I would address as a building administrator right away, just reinforce expectations it's fine for any staff member to say, please pick up that piece of trash, but if the
Right.
cafeteria as a whole is just messy.
From my understanding, it's not even mess, it's more volume,
Yeah.
it's noise, and it even happened on testing days, they lost 10 of their 20 minutes of recess, and it was ugly.
I-
But I
So-
think they could say like, that's a very minor offense, and affects,
Right,
So I think like having that.
having a
language,
guy,
even
like
though
some
you're
kind of
focusing on the
guy,
big
yeah.
behaviors. So that's not a big behavior.
Right,
Or just a teacher referral, so what happens is like, that would be like, instead of doing that, maybe they would refer them to their teachers. The teachers
Right.
And then go from there. Yeah.
Now, I'm a dinosaur, so it's been a long time since I've been in the building, but I can never remember not having an administrator in the cafeteria or at recess, just because it's so important. Visibility, but practices have changed quite a bit.
I think staffing has made that harder.
Mhm.
Yes.
I definitely has.
Because I think our administrators are putting out 1 million, it's not that they don't want to be there, I think they're putting out 1 million fires, and I see them.
They're stretched. They're stretched. It's a very complex and very demanding job.
So on our agenda, any other, I guess we move to review identified community or council feedback. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up or discuss at this point?
I just have a question about like automating that process a little bit more. I know we have the resource mailbox that is monitored.
Have we gotten any emails? I just think that's
not useful then, not just to be frank. I mean, if nobody's emailing, I think it's because, I mean, obviously there's a lot of feedback, so.
Did the Find Out First ever go out explaining who we are and what we're doing? I know we talked about doing that, but we waited until we had the graphic and then we waited until we had everything set up. Okay, because I don't remember ever seeing that, so I'm sure a lot of people still don't even know we exist.
Yeah, it would be nice
That could be
Yeah.
something helpful for like the
to
next.
have it go out before the beginning of the school year, but even like, I don't know. Because that might give us some direction for next year too. I feel like we have some good direction with some of these policies. But I agree with you. We also want to get that input on, especially if we have like a focus area with like mental health, you
I think
know.
it's right, I think it right now comes down to marketing.
Yeah.
Seen as a resource. at this point in time.
But that could be something, like maybe we ask people to include when they're sending out like PTA information at the beginning of the year. Like, you know, here are some resources. Can we do that? Like,
Yeah, I think for now, because it's down to the community's partnership with the local schools and just with the community in general, because like the FCPS is giving us a mailbox, a website,
Right.
fancy logo. You know, we gotta give them halfway with some groundwork. So,
oh, yeah. But that's what I'm saying, because that might, if we, like the timing of that though, is what I'm thinking. If
Yeah. I mean,
PTA are, they're meeting to make their budget over the summer, it might be nice, they're having, a lot of them have like popsicles on the blacktop, working for membership, like right from the beginning. It might be before we have our first meeting of the year.
Would this be like the county PTA where you can get the all schools kind of thing, or be like just one?
I don't know. I think that's where,
It'd be cool because of how our community is currently staffed. You know?
right,
If we could go to the top and get them to incorporate throughout.
exactly. But maybe if we have like the county chapter, share it with all of their branches,
Mhm.
and maybe just add our email, but just, you know, because we've talked, I think people who are attending have talked it up with their different schools and things like that, but that way we could reach
I
out.
don't know if you guys want to do like, you know, if there's right now, not right now, but like, because the money's like, you know, still getting there. But later on in the fall, if you guys want to like, you know, request like flyers, my goodness, postcards.
Yeah.
With, you know, your information on there, you can go to like, you know, like community events. And like, you know, I think we're having like the Frederick County 275th anniversary is coming up here. What did you say? Okay, we're just having one. Yes,
It was
yay,
nice.
Boston, yeah.
But there's like
So,
a
like, those
fair,
kind of
like,
things.
yeah.
What is that?
You didn't know- you didn't know that.
I couldn't attend. That's
She
just-
was awesome.
We were there, Ashton was there. I couldn't attend. I had to. But
But there's like the fair, like there are
The fair,
other
yeah.
different, but so much of that happens in September. That's why I'm just bringing it
well, I mean,
up
like,
because,
there's small little pockets, like, if anything, like first Saturdays.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, like, if you guys just want to take, like, not like it's official, but like wherever you are, you want to go pack you know, handouts, like, hey, I'll just leave it somewhere on the community board, like in the store, kind of thing. And people are like, oh, this is, you see it there? You know, like,
right.
local restaurants have like pinup boards. Just throw it out there.
And then I guess the back to school day, right?
Thank you.
I know the PTA puts together folders, at least for Middletown.
Right. Getting those folders,
Sliding.
yeah.
That's
Sliding,
kind of
just
what I'm
to
thinking. If we
figure
just have
it
that chat now, then we could start putting that in place.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Because if we don't have money for flyers, but if we ask people to include our logo and
Exactly.
email
You
on
send them
there,
our
so that's
logo,
what
all
I'm
that
saying,
stuff.
yeah.
Exactly.
Like if we just, and that's why if we communicate with the county PTA board, they could share with all their different chapters,
Right.
please include this in- when
Or even
you're
on their
creating your
websites.
flyer.
A link to the-
Yeah.
A link to us on their website.
Mhm.
Yes, the more digital, the more free, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I think even just to find out, having it going out kind of regularly.
I agree.
You know, I mean,
Because honestly, I think people do, I don't know. I say that, they look at that more than a flyer, but you also delete. You get too many
You don't
emails.
want
it's
Saturate, yeah.
just kind of like the.
No, I agree. I think both.
And then just the feedback.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have to be long.
No,
I mean, even if it
That
got
shouldn't be
attached to
on,
school newsletters, like I know each
Yeah,
of my kids' schools sends out a
yeah.
weekly newsletter. If
Or
they
even
would just
just-
attach it to the bottom of their newsletter,
I think that's a great idea.
then it's there because the school's already attached, at least
Even
ours,
one
the
of the
PTA,
yeah.
it's already on there, so just throw ours on there too.
Can we request to get added to just even the school websites? Because I think if people have a concern, a lot of times they'll go kind of check out, how do I handle the conflict on their school website?
We have a link on FCPS's main page, so you can just send them that link and just for a kickback, but like, that is your night of like, we're committed, you know, like, you find us on FCPS.org.
Yeah, but I don't think people are generally gonna go.
No, I'm saying, when you market to different groups
Oh,
of the
yeah,
PTA.
okay, yeah.
You go,
Like-
who are you? Well, we're
Right.
right here.
I mean, if I have a problem, I'm not gonna go dig.
No, that's what I'm
No,
saying,
no,
but
no,
they're
no.
more likely to
Very
dig
close
through
to
their
that.
school website.
Right. But is there a way to ask, like someone higher than us, obviously, ask the schools, put this committee thing on your website or in your newsletter, or
We just need to draft it, and Dr. Alameda sends out a weekly communication to principals, and she would just ask, please include this either in your newsletter or your website, whichever is manageable.
because that would be great, because then it's gonna show up routinely, and it's gonna show up for every school, and then it's, because people aren't thinking about it until suddenly they have something they wanna say, and then it's, where do I go, who am I talking to?
Right.
So if it routinely shows up through school communication, that's the easiest way for people to find us.
You know what?
And even just for like Sabrina's position, to understand that there's a difference too between, like if there's a conflict, they go to Sabrina. Like if they have a concern about policy or something, then they would email us. Does that make sense?
There's some overlap, but yes.
Yes, but yeah,
Yeah, so
but
absolutely.
we're not gonna mediate like a,
Correct, correct. You know, and again, we can share kind of broader view feedback, my role helps with more direction for individuals. Also the broader view, it can do both, but if people have a specific concern, then I can work with them to get them to the right person or the right process and help them move that concern forward. And also look at the bigger picture if we're missing something.
I think now that we understand what we're doing. For the committee, it would all link really nicely to have a more formal process for feedback. And then link to then, okay, we're hitting all this, what's the policy? Do we need to tweak anything? And, it just seems like a nice flow. Versus kind of the onesie-twosie anecdotal, which is helpful, definitely, but, I can't go to as many of some of these meetings sometimes, so.
no,
It can be hard to get feedback.
But I like that we're having that conversation now. I think it's my point, because it might,
Yes.
because I think my other question is, when is our first meeting? Are we following the same pattern? And then, because if it's a third week in September, which it might be, there's a lot of stuff that's happening at schools before that, and then so much that initial communication is already happening.
I'm still struggling with what it is we're up to long term. It seems to me like in the last few months, we were basically repurposed to, for lack of a better phrase, bail out the workload of the policy committee or review of old policies. Once we get through that backlog, or help them get through it, and I'm not convinced, based upon our conversation with Mr. Willis, that we're actually going to do that.
yes.
But in any case, let's assume that we do help with the backlog. Then what? And so I'm curious to know what guidance, and I'm not expecting an answer for that, it's a rhetorical question. It would be helpful, I think, if maybe over the summer months, the board could provide maybe sort of another round of, okay, here's what we want you to do. Because I gathered from what came out of that discussion in the wake of the election and the new board this past winter was policy backlog. Okay, we're making progress there. What's next? What are we doing besides entertaining the hobby horses of people on this committee, right? I'm interested in discipline policy, maybe some other cats and dogs. We might hear things from the community that we might bring to this meeting. But is it really what the board needs? I don't know.
Well, I guess it,
So I could speak to Your statement that you said that it's like you're building out the board for the policy work. I had to defend this committee's access to policy. So it's not building out, it's a privilege. We didn't actually touch what we do and change and drive the system forward. And you're working along with the board's work is policy. We're engaging the board with work, so like, it is not busy work. That's what we're up to. Now, and it feels that way, but remember, this committee, its stated purpose is directed by the board. So it will change based on how the board feels. And the other half of our community is that community input. So talking to the PTAs, getting out to the community. What's the word on the street? The board gets that from public comment sometimes, but like this committee's job is to go under the rocks and get the other comment. So what can we creatively do to pull in from the community? Are we on social media? Are we going to put up a stand on first Saturdays in downtown? How are we getting the community's feedback? We are a channel. Other communities are having listening sessions. What are we doing to get the community's input? That's our work. What the board says we're going to do, and advise the board based on community. So how are we getting the community involved? Now, to your absolutely supportive of what you're saying. Unfortunately, most of our work this last year was staying on our feet. It was just, and kudos and thanks to you all for being here. I'm so grateful for all of you because I know what you went through. And so I thank you. Dr. Marco and I and Sabrina, we came together, and the thing is, this committee has not had legs over the years, and you guys have legs. So I want to thank you, bottom of my heart, for being here, because other community members you started with in years past did not stay. So I want to thank you for that. I really do. The part about the community action, you guys get to decide that. The board is not to the point where they wouldn't take your recommendation on what you think you should do. They're open to that. They are. But they're asking for that assistance in the policy review. And then there's members who are looking into, wanting to speak to what you should do. I don't really want that for you. I want you to have the other committees are driving their own bus. I want you to drive your own bus too. So like, what do you guys want to do in the realm of being a citizens advisory council?
So if we want to make recommendations for mental health, cyberbullying, like that is where we could do it as well as the policy. Is that what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
And then is what does the community want? What is Frederick County is growing?
Yeah.
So
I
like,
also see that I think a lot of our things align because I think that also talks about the extreme behavior that we're seeing. So much of that is tied to mental health, and that's also tied to safety because we have kids who are experiencing trauma because of the extreme behavior that they're experiencing, and then it becomes cyclical. So I think they really do overlap if that's kind of where we want to, it's big, but if we want to kind of focus on that and make sure that there are policies written in a way but then we could also make recommendations for ideas. So that's kind of my question with like writing up that draft of a policy change. How detailed can we get if we want to make suggestions of expanding character education to then also have clear consequences that go along with the code of conduct for kids that who might need mental health support, what's there for them, but also what are we doing to protect the kids that feel unsafe because of the extreme behaviors that they're experiencing around them too.
What you just said, in this community's charge is to make recommendations to the board. Mm-hmm. And so you guys can welcome public comment at a board meeting, speak directly to the board. You guys can write a draft me to read to the board, but it would be more impactful if you guys came to a public comment and stood right there and read to the board. I know there's a lot of communities who SEC and REC, Racial Equity and Racial Education, they come a lot. And they are before the board a lot. They come, they have their meetings, they come together and they draft what they want to do to the board together. and they go to the board with the recommendations to the board.
Okay.
So those are heard, and those move needles. They do. And so I highly recommend that while the board gives direction to this committee, the other half
We need
of the
to communicate
coin,
with them.
the other half of the coin is communication, but the other half of the coin is you both take, this kind of takes the direction from the board and advises the board. So you get the other side of the coin is yours. As the Citizens Advisory Council, what are you advising the board on? They've asked you, they give you a charge in policy. But the other side of the coin is you get to advise them. And as far as the community's heart, what the community's saying, and you are the community. So I know you said before, we have voices here, we have ideas, but it's when it's needed, when health is needed. Those are good points. And I bet we can walk 10 steps and get people to agree with you. But this
Yeah.
one, mental health.
Oh, yeah.
So, take those charges that you guys have and bring them to the board. So we got our direction. I think now we're down to like how we implement it. Like, how do we formalize it? How does it flow? I know this feels like a jerky car right now, but now we have a car. You guys are all here. We have a car. So now it's kind of like, how do we get this to roll smoothly? That was the first year thing. How do we have a car?
I think, once we have functioning leadership officers for our committee, not within the board and the system, that it can help set agendas and focus people's wants and desires as it regards.
Excellent point. That just right here is not my job.
Yeah,
I'm the liaison, but I stepped in because again, we have voids.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a trying.
Yeah, and so this is gonna get the things that are near and dear to your heart, whereas again, the community, what we're supposed to be representing,
Well,
without
sure,
somebody
you guys
driving the
are-
bus for us, we're kind of.
Well, you guys wanted to hear from staff. That's why we're putting in here. We had staff coming in.
Yeah,
that's
nice.
been great.
That's
Yeah.
been-
I'm trying to be a conduit,
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
you've done a
But
good
you're
job,
doing something
Mr. J.
you're not- you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, it should be us, yeah.
And so that's why we really don't have our charge, because we don't have somebody leading. Currently.
Yes.
So September.
Can't disagree.
Like what happened in the beginning, where everybody came with their clear agenda item.
Yes.
They talked about what they wanted, and then we just turned around the room and we didn't. really
Although that
accomplish-
was
you know, I mean, it
based
was-
on feedback.
It is-
It was supposed
Yes,
to be,
it was
but I
I
think some
guess,
of us,
yeah, but
But it's hard to separate from your own personal.
Well, and I think you're mentioning, I think both happened. I think a lot of people showed up at the first meeting with personal agendas, and then we did go out into the community and got what our feeders,
Yeah.
and we have that list somewhere, what our feeders.
Oh, yeah.
Word docs.
And then we narrowed it.
Right, and then we
Yeah.
narrowed
Yeah.
it down. So it was two kind of things, and a lot of the people who came with personal agendas are not here anymore, because that's not what we do, so.
is there a way to get like a calendar of the different events during the year? I mean, I'm sure are they pre-scheduled?
For the
Like
county
where-
events or?
Yes, where we could have like a little booth, and even if we just, and split up
So right now, I
The
think
dates or
it'll be,
whatever.
connect with Tiana Hale maybe. And we can, it should be, at many events, we usually has a booth. We usually have a booth there. We could join that booth, that's booth, and be there, that booth. There's always one set up for us, doing events. If we, this booth will be here, this time, we could join that booth and just be there at the booth.
maybe that's something free we could do at the
Mhm.
beginning to
Yeah.
divide up the different dates
So
and
it'd be
times.
Tiana.
And even if we had at all these places, a QR code,
Yeah.
just one flyer with a QR code.
Then
People
you don't
can
have to
scan
pay
it
for a
with their
flyer.
phone. Right, you don't have to pay for a lot of flyers. You have to pay for like, you say you have 5 tables, throw the 5 flyers, QR code on it, which you can make for free. People scan it with their phone, they immediately have our information on their phone.
Yeah.
And the find out first, and the news.
Find out first is key.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think that is, and it's hard because we have evolved. I mean, I think about a year ago, we were here new, right? And we were just, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm from Walkersville. I mean, we were, just trying to figure out what are we supposed to do? And then our job changed like 3 times.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of constantly evolved. So it's kind of hard to go out and explain to our county of 45,000 kids plus staff and parents and families what we do, because it has changed so much. So it's hard to say, well, here's who we are and call us if you need, you know what I mean? Like there's not, so I think that's, it's important for them to know who we are and what we're doing. And, that we are taking feedback in. And then, like if someone came to me with something, there are some things that people have come to me with, then I will go back and look, okay, well, what is the policy? Are we lacking a policy? Do we need to move forward? And then let's bring this up for conversation. So I will do that homework before I bring it to this table to discuss. So I think to let the public know, like we exist, we're working in a couple different levels of responsibility, but I think we need to be really clear with the general public about.
I agree, and I think if we have because we can say we're really focused, we have a big area that we compass of like concerns, but this year our goal is going to be to focus on safety, which encompasses like mental health and some of these things that we talked about, behavior. I think then people will be like, oh, then I'd like to share this idea.
Yes. And that came from
It's
that
very
huge
broad.
brainstorming session. Like
Right.
we did put all 25,000 ideas and we narrowed it and came up with our own, we think these are important. So I think,
Right.
That's going to continue and that's our thing. So
Yeah.
But I think we also want to be careful not to say that in a way that discourages open communication, because if someone has something they really want to address and they feel like, oh, well, they said they're just working on safety this year.
yeah.
No,
We're going to
yeah.
sit on this. What do we do with it?
No, I think we can say it's like a focus area, but our role is to hear, because then maybe
Yes.
that's something else we can discuss and look at that policy. Like yes.
Well, and our mission thing is posted with so that tells people what we do.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
once
I
they
have
see
this
it.
as an area of support, so we're not in a focus where it's not open to other things, but an area of support.
Right.
Safety and mental health. We put that in there. That's what I heard what you said about not pigeonholing this.
Yes.
Yes.
So, again, I want to be cognizant of time.
Are we at time?
Not quite.
Okay.
Probably. But there was a question about the next meeting, and I will look at, probably, again, most committees don't start again until September timeframe, so we'll probably do September. However, we may be able to send out like a poll to see what, if the same days are convenient, and maybe changing it to earlier in September, so we're not at the end of September, but looking at doing something earlier and then maybe continuing to stay earlier each time we meet.
I think Labor Day makes September a little bit tricky this year. We can get falls.
Remember, schools are like, they're just saying hello in September, so like, maybe mid-September, because like, will there really be any issues week one?
There won't
Hopefully
be
not.
any issues. But I think what we're concerned about is our best way of getting out the information.
Yeah, all the
And
best
if we're too far into September, we're missing a lot of opportunity at the back to school nights, at the meet and greets on the blacktop where PTAs are working on their
The
membership.
fall was like nothing but gathering, because it was colder, people can gather together, so I think we're gonna find a lot of opportunity. But the fair is late September, so we're meeting like mid to early September, we can prepare for the fair. And recently, I think the next thing to do there is just join the SCPS booth. There'll be a booth there, actually, I'll probably be in there one day myself. So like, there's a booth there in the art room section by the food, and people come by in droves. And so I don't know whether, they would
Well, that's good to know, though.
have them sign up and like, do man the booth or just support the booth. And just
I would say we should just
hang around.
add to
Yeah.
the board.
Does FCPS have a booth in the street
Yes.
in the fall?
Yeah,
That's
if the county's doing it, we're a booth there. So I think in those are already plugged in places, you can just, it's already a big sign behind you, you're just there to have your face,
Yeah.
and you can point to like, definitely like
QR code?
a little poster, put up on the side.
And
of
then
it.
That's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, that
and then
QR
if you
code on
wanted
that
to
page
grow it,
could be, the QR code, a sheet about CAC could be just given to staff, and staff can, in that way, again, if no one can be there, or if, we'd have to check on, non-staff being part of that also. Even though you're a committee, we'd have to do some checking to make sure. But either way, we can still have some identification and information there.
Even just like tape to the table next to all the other handouts.
Yeah.
Here's a page about CAC, here's their QR code,
Exactly.
take it and go.
Okay.
That right there, that's the community, you're gonna hear back. And you're gonna hear back in places that like people who may not be able to come to a board meeting. And, or just have it, send that one email. That's the catch-all we are. That's wonderful.
FCPS has that big back to school night, right? Is it at Tuscarora? It's the big,
Countywide, that's cool.
yeah, it's like an open house.
Used to be the eliminating the achievement gap forum. We haven't done that.
I was like, does that still exist?
We haven't done that since pre-COVID.
Okay, I've been there with another organization before. So I was gonna say that was a way to get to a lot of people.
Well, we'll email, information coming out and to see, when dates are available and look at all that. And again, thank you. Awesome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're gonna adjourn, we have to say adjourn.
We are.
Thank you.